I just finished the book by Shari Franke, The House of My Mother, and it was amazing, and I want to talk about the top things that I learned from it in today's video. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. Sofa's back there. I'm right here. Doggies are not here right now. They're actually still in bed. It's very early morning. If you've been following me, you'll know that I now record very early because as the day gets going, it's calamity, right? And so everybody's sleeping right now. So I still kind of got my tired face on, but that's not going to stop us from talking about Shari Franke's book. Now, if you are new to the channel, my name is Paul. If you're not new to the channel, my name still is Paul. Before we go any further into this, just keep in mind, I'm not a doctor, a lawyer, a therapist, a cop, a defense attorney, a state attorney. None of that fancy credentialed stuff. Only credentials we got up in here is the sofa, my sass. So these are just my opinions on public information about these cases, trials, and stories that we watch, okay? Do with that what you will. Now, specifically the story, the book, the case that we're talking about today stems from Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrand, but we are specifically talking about Ruby's daughter, Shari Franke, who, like I said, just wrote a book, and it's called The House of My Mother. So we do a book club over here. Every month we focus on a book, and this month was that. Now, that being said, this is probably one of my top favorite books we've ever read, okay? I mean, they're all very good in many different ways, but this one specifically. And before I lose the thought, I want to say, well, couple of things. First of all, we're going to be doing a Jean Benet book next because I need to, right? But I also want to continue reading books like this that are written from a victim's perspective and what they learned in their story, because I took so much from her sharing her story and the lessons that she's learned from it and the ways that she maneuvered through life having this situation bestowed upon her. Okay, so there's that. So if you have suggestions for that, please drop it off in the comment section. Okay, so I want to talk about the top things. These are in no particular, well, let me say this. I was going to say they're in no particular order. However, I want to talk about the most important one first. And then after that, it's just kind of like what I learned from the book and like stuff like that. If you followed me, or if you remember, you would have seen my member videos along the way about it. I've done a couple on the main channel about it, but you know, so just that might be a little bit redundant, but this is kind of off the cuff. I've made a list, but it's not like scripted or anything. So, you know, I just kind of end up rambling and I apologize. Now, the first biggest overall lesson I just learned, I basically just hinted on, and that was Shari Franke having the bravery to put her entire story out there, thoughts, feelings, emotions, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? For us to consume, to look at, and to, I would say, learn from, which is what I did. Now, one of the things that really stuck out to me is towards the end when she's talking about the life goes on part, we're wrapping the story up and then this, that, and the other. And she's speaking of just what she, took from her mother and or Ruby, as she calls her, and Kevin and whatnot. So in one part, she's saying, I do see little nuances of Ruby. Basically, she makes herself sound like she keeps a meticulously clean house, and that's 100% Ruby. And she said other things, not so much, but the way she said it, and I wrote it down here, she said, basically, I did things in spite of Ruby, not because of Ruby. That resonated so much with me to be like, wow, yes. Because Ruby, if you follow the case, I mean, from our perspective, right, we're not Shari. We're not, for most of us, we're not in the family, whatever. I mean, some of you might be, but we're just strangers watching this from afar is what I'm getting at. And now with her and saying this, the in spite of and whatnot, Ruby really was this person that was like, everything you have and do is like, I'm your God, right? And so growing up with the Ruby is the end all be all. I have everything because of her. She's the answer to all my stuff. And then that realization of, oh no, I was able to accomplish A, B, and C, not because of Ruby, but in spite of what she did to me. Such a powerful moment there, right? Because I think most all of us can appreciate or look back maybe over our past past. And whether it be lessons that we've learned and whatnot, or things that we grew up learning from our parents that we identified with, that we were like, oh, maybe that's not me, is what I'm getting at here, okay? So that part spoke volumes to me. Now, overall, just going through the book and hearing her speak about everything from what it was like to grow up in a YouTube family to this guy, Derek, that she ended up in this situation with, and the way that he honestly groomed her and essayed her, and her being so open and honest with that, as well as about the church's response to that. So to me, that took so much bravery to put that out there, because you can see that, number one, she's writing from her perspective of hindsight. So it's like, and I think some of us, or all of us, or I don't know, you tell me, I'm kind of speaking for all of us. I'll just speak for myself when I say, you know, we go through life, we learn lessons, we have good things, we have bad things, whatever it is. With time in between that, we can look back and say, oh, you know what, this is what I learned from that. You know, hindsight's 20/20 basically. And so I appreciate that she's going through that, but also it's a very vulnerable place to be in, right? And to speak of, and not a lot of people do, and that's why a lot of perpetrators are able to get away with what they get away with. We see this all the time, right? That part was very huge to me. Her story and narrative of the realization about her mother and the lessons learned from that, of like, wait a minute, this isn't right. I'm going to stand on that truth because this isn't right. That takes a lot to do. Life is one of those things where, in my experience, it's like you get comfortable being comfortable, even if that's uncomfortable, if that makes sense. Also, when you're growing up and you're younger, you're still, depending on age and whatnot, you still usually look at your parents as like, they know everything. Now, I know I'm not speaking for everybody here, right? And it depends on the age and whatnot and your own experiences. So for her to quickly see like, oh, wait a second, this, and we'll get more into those little details there, but I'm just talking about the overall, like, say, spiritual lesson here or whatever. I thought it was very brave of her, and I thought it was very cool, and I thought it was nice that she shared that experience with us. Now, towards the end, again, her own personal story of forgiveness and what that looks like in relation to the variety of people in her life, meaning Ruby, Kevin, Jody, you name it. I feel like forgiveness is such a personal journey. It's just like a fingerprint. It's whatever it is for our situation to forgive, and who, whatever that is, right? It's so unique. And so I really appreciate when people share their journey with that, because it can help to navigate our own personal journeys with that. And overall for the book, not just the forgiveness part, but everything. I know a lot of people, because I was like reading comments and stuff and articles and things like this and reviews, and a lot of people had issue with the Kevin aspect and almost feel like he slid out of the situation, or she shouldn't have forgiven him, or that whole vibe, right? Now, for me personally, yes, I did think that there was a lot going on with Kevin. Well, let me rephrase that. There was a lot not going on with Kevin, okay? Definitely, he, you know, turned his back, so to speak, right? He went along with whatever Ruby and Jody said. He just gave whim to everything with this unfolding right in front of everybody's face. It was so enlightening to read Shari talking about the experience of seeing the things that are going down in the house, and her dad just blinders, you know, just right here. And I'm sitting there looking back, and it really beckoned to my own experience with my own father. Now, my father's been passed away for 20 years, I guess. You know, a long time, obviously, right? Yeah, probably about 20 years at this point. I don't know the exact time, but it's a long time. My dad, totally different circumstances, but I resonated with Shari in that I wish my dad had been there for me in the ways of A, B, C, D, E, and F, and he wasn't, right? On many different levels. Hearing her describe that about her own father, I just resonated with it, you know? And again, it brought me back to that level of, wow, this has been really refreshing to read someone's story and journey, because I can resonate with this in my own way, not identical to hers, right? Now, so her own personal journey of forgiveness with him, I get it. Now, if you look at the law aspect, yeah, I'm surprised he didn't catch charges, honestly. Like, I really, even after reading the book, you know, even after reading the book, I'm just like, what? You know, so put that part aside. If she is finding family and unity with Kevin and siblings, and they're rebuilding and whatnot, and she has found her own journey to forgive him, then more power to her, right? But yeah, I'm shocked he didn't catch charges in the midst of it because he didn't talk to them for like a year. We'll get to that in a second. And in fact, let's use this to segue into some of the more like, oh, we found this out and that out, whatever. So top thing, absolutely loved that she put her story out there, let us into it after she was not, she was forced to let us into her life, her whole life through Ruby, right? And 8 passengers and whatnot. So my hat's off to her in that way. And this book was very beneficial to me on many levels. So, okay. Ruby knew and was warned about Jody. Now I've made maybe a members video on this, so I'm sorry if this is redundant to some of you. Now when Jody starts to come into the situation, now remember, Shari at this point is, a kid, air quotes, right? Ruby and Jody are supposed to be the adults. We'll just put it that way, and Kevin. Shari does the research. She looks Jody up. She brings the receipts. She finds horrifying, shocking information about her and the lives she's destroyed and the career she's destroyed and the career she's destroyed, the whole 9 yards, marriages, you name it. She presents this to her mother. Doesn't want to hear it. We're going to ignore it. So that was a big thing for me in reading the book, is I was like, oh, wait a second. Ruby knew before they got into this the dangers and perils of Jody Hildebrand, but she ignored it, and probably because she didn't view her kids as anything but these little, whatever, not human, not on her level, not important. So I always was under the impression that Jody slithered her way in and it was a slow burn. And while yes, on some arenas that was going on, over here, meaning Ruby, and by proxy Kevin, they knew about this, right? Shari told them. She was the child in the situation doing the due diligence. So that was a big thing for me to where I was like, oh yeah, my sympathy level, and not that I had any, but like maybe, Jody really did manipulate her on some level. No. She 100% knew. And was really enjoying seeing other people eventually leave Jody. I keep interchanging them. I apologize. As people started to catch on that Jody had surrounded herself by, and they started leaving Jody one by one, this just was to Ruby like, oh, now I can get closer. Now I can be the top dog. Now I can do this. So she was blinded by like this narcissistic something for power and attention that she could get through Jody. And I think vice versa, that went for Jody to Ruby as well. Now, I already did a separate video on this one for the main channel, but we'll talk about it again. Ruby and Jody were lovers, okay? We all guessed it. We all thought it. We all saw it. But bam, there's that. Now, in a normal given situation, you do you, boo, right? But the context of this is that, number one, like Shari said in the book, outwardly they are very, anti-LGBT relationships, and that's horrible, this and that and the other. All the while, behind the scenes, they're doing this. Not to mention, in Shari's bedroom, they kicked her out for Jody and then had the sultry love affair in there. And that's where I was just like, ew. Like, seriously, gross. Like, really? And gross on many levels. Like, ick on many levels, okay? That part right there was just like, are you serious? Kevin's sequestered downstairs and eventually can't even come back to the house. Jody starts isolating him like she does all the other men in the relationships. And again, Kevin's just kind of letting it happen. And Shari's watching this like, imagine being one of the kids, how confusing that would be when you were behind the scenes and you're doing this in your home with this person, Jody, who you already are getting this bad vibe from. Now, another thing that was kind of shocking but not surprising was when Shari said that she found that evidence on the computer where Ruby was basically saying that Jody's a selfish lover and she has to do all this stuff to get any kind of like attention or whatever from her. And I'm like, well, yeah, she has nothing there to give. Shari even said early in the book, when Jody came along, she was like, a therapist or someone like that usually has some kind of healing or warmth or something like that. Jody didn't have that energy. She didn't have that at all. And I agree with Shari on that, where you kind of expect someone to have somewhat of a nurturing level, even if it's like a stern nurturing thing. She sounded void of any kind of human vibe. I don't know. And that's one thing with the cases that I'm always curious about is like, what's the energy? What is it like to be around this person? And so I was very thankful that Shari articulated that so well. The level of hypocrisy, which we just touched on a second ago with them being lovers and all that, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Hypocrisy is the backbone of what was going on here. The things that Jody and Ruby were doing, and then Ruby before Jody, because I know Ruby likes to play it off like, oh, Jody came in and, you know, she manipulated me and did this and they did that. This was going on before. And that's a huge question that a lot of people had with 8 Passengers is, and this is for both Ruby and Kevin, of, well, you know, well, Jody came in and destroyed the family, and it's like, but there's a lot of stuff going on before that. Ruby seemed to be driving the ship, and Kevin just let her do whatever and didn't step up and say, wait, this is not right. Obviously, it escalated into something insane when Jody came along, but nonetheless, okay? The hypocrisy of the teachings, of the beliefs, of the moral systems, of the actions was so infuriating to read, so angering. The whole time I was like, poor Shari, and I'm not trying to say like, oh, you poor little thing, but just in the way literally of like, bless your heart, girl. I cannot imagine what it would be like to be in that situation and have to bite your tongue every single day and put up with the BS that these people were putting her and her siblings through, right? That part of my hat was off to her, okay? Because literally reading this, and I'm not trying to say anything about her siblings when I say this, because like I know she brings up Chad and like there was some friction there and whatnot. They were all just trying to survive, in my opinion, right? So you're gonna do what you gotta do and all that. But Shari was like the only sane one in that situation of the adults. She was the only sane one in that whole scenario, and that it should be the opposite, right? The kids shouldn't be coming to the parents and being like, this is the logical thing to do, what are you thinking? So that's the part where I'm like, I don't know how she didn't just absolutely go berserk, right? I mean, again, hats off to you. Now, as far as the apologies go in the court that we saw, you know, them coming into court and their speeches, it was so interesting for her to share her experience with that. And number one, the way she walked you through so many different feelings and textures of her story and, you know, what that was like. Okay, here we are. There's all cameras on us. This whole thing of always having a camera on you from the time you can remember till she probably always will, right? There's going to always be a fascination with this. And she articulates the annoyance of that and the damage of that. But then all the way down to sentencing where we saw them speaking. And I just walked away from that part thinking, oh yeah, she clocked Ruby. She sees right through her. Now, like we saw, she recognized that Ruby knew how to play the game better than Jody. Like if you compare the speeches and whatnot, Ruby knew how to play the game better. Ruby was afraid for her safety. She realized the severity, even though it sounds like she in the beginning was thinking she was still going to get out. She was still playing this whole thing. It was still almost an attention grab. Like it wasn't real, the severity of it, but she's also very manipulative. So she knew how to sit there and do that apology. And when Shari said that when Ruby came out and didn't even make eye contact, she just stared dead ahead. I mean, that tells you all you need to know. There's no warmth that I ever get from Ruby. There's just deadness behind her eyes. And I think that Shari really translated that. Now, when it comes to Jody and her apology, I mean, like you saw it, right? Jody doesn't think she did anything wrong. I mean, the whole thing, I love the kids. I hope they have a great life. And, you know, there's two sides to every story. And even if you watched it or if you read it, you'll know the judge is like, what's the other side to what you did to the kids? Like, what? Are you insane? Also talking about the phone calls from jail, prison, whatever, from Jody, where she just literally views herself as a prophet. You can listen to those phone calls and it's like, oh, she absolutely thinks of herself as a prophet in this. Okay, then also tying into that, the fact that Ruby never apologized. The only apology she got, I believe, was like, I should have spent more time around y'all. And I would almost venture to say that that was Ruby's way of saying, to continue to discipline you, right? There was never I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry I put you through this. And to me, that's just bizarre for somebody who got up there and gave such a wooden apology speech, which came off as more of a award acceptance speech, than to not be able to say that personally to your daughter was eye-opening. Now, also, Shari, when she brings up Chad Daybell, Lori Daybell, Visions of Glory, I mean, if you know, we're kind of reading that book from time to time on the channel just to see like what was the choke called. And literally, she said that she was like, that book book Visions of Glory, Ruby and Jody were all over it, okay? And then she talks about running into the case of Chad and Lori, and she's like, the same stuff Chad and Lori are talking about, same stuff over here. Same stuff. The cases just didn't arrive at the same place. You see what I'm saying? That dynamic was not jaw-dropping because we saw it from afar, but to hear someone who lived through it and was fortunate to get out of it, whoa. Right? Whoa. Big time. So, I mean, it's driving me even further to keep reading that book just to see, what's going on, because we're about halfway through it. And again, I'm just like, I mean, I don't look at it as a real thing, So I'm trying to put that lens on us when we read it and be like, Ruby, Jody, Chad, Lori, countless others, they view this as a real thing or whatever. So anyways, there's that. Okay. Also, Shari's story about the guy Derek she met. We already talked about that a little bit. It was grooming her, doing all that stuff. She's going through that. And I kept thinking, it's so sad that she doesn't have someone to go to about this. Her, parental figures and whatnot, because this is kind of like what happens, right? Like in this scenario, like she's left out to the cold and she doesn't know what to do with it. Thank God she had that other family she was able to confide in, who she calls mom and dad, and that they were there for her and acted like a real mom and dad. I was very thankful that she had those two by her side. And really those are, that's kind of the list I made, and I actually added some as we were going through. Those were the biggest things that really jumped out to me. Now again, this is not an exhaustive list. It's literally me just kind of talking off the cuff and going through my little bullet points here. But those really stuck out to me. And again, to round it back out, the fact that she shared her story like that, the fact that she was so articulate, the fact that she read the Audible book, that's how I consumed it. She read it so well. She was so intelligent. She's so smart. And the book helped me out. I hope it helps others out too. And even though, like for me, no, I did not live through something like she did, but there's definitely something to be, taken from it and applied to my own life. And for that, I thank her for that. So let me know what you think down in the comment section. Have you read it? If you haven't, immediately go read. I love all the books we read. This one really stood out. And again, if you know other books like this told from a victim perspective, that they are really going deep into like the psychology and the lessons that they learned and all this kind of stuff, please drop it down below. I would love to look into those. So that's it. If you're still listening, I greatly appreciate it. Drop some little sofas off in the comment section if you don't mind for Rosco and Spirit. The boys are sleeping, and the rest of the Sofa Squads will have a place to hang out, talk about this case, this book, all the other stuff we talk about here at the Sofa Squad. And until we meander our way down there to do that, I'll see y'all soon. I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. And then like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Rosco on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.